The shadows stretched long across the quiet suburban streets of Derry, Maine, as the sun sank low on the horizon. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it a palpable sense of unease that had permeated the town in recent weeks. It was as if the very air itself held its breath, anticipating the horrors that were to come. 9-year-old Timmy Britton hummed softly to himself as he pedaled his bicycle down the deserted sidewalk, his backpack slung over his shoulders. The fading daylight cast an eerie glow, and Timmy couldn't help but feel a shiver of apprehension. Stories of the recent clown sightings had been the talk of the town, and even a brave young boy like Timmy wasn't immune to the growing sense of dread. As he neared the end of his street, Timmy noticed a flash of color out of the corner of his eye. Turning his head, he spotted a figure standing partially obscured by the shadows. A figure dressed in a garish, oversized suit, its pale face painted in a grotesque smile. Timmy's heart lurched in his chest, and he gripped the handlebars of his bike, nearly losing control. "Hello," Timmy called out tentatively, his voice quavering. The figure stepped forward, revealing itself to be a clown, its vibrant costume a stark contrast to the darkening surroundings. Timmy's breath caught in his throat as the clown's eyes locked onto him, a manic grin spreading across its painted lips. "Hello, Timmy," the clown said, its voice a sickly sweet sing-song. "Aren't you out a little late?" Timmy's instincts screamed at him to pedal away as fast as he could, but something about the clown's gaze held him in place, paralyzed with fear. "What do you want?" Timmy stammered, cursing himself for not being braver. The clown's grin widened, revealing a mouthful of sharp, yellowed teeth. "Why, I just want to play," it purred, taking a step towards the boy. Timmy's heart pounded in his ears as he finally found the courage to turn his bike and pedal furiously down the street. He could hear the clown's laughter echoing behind him, taunting him as he pumped his legs, desperate to put as much distance between himself and the sinister figure. As Timmy raced home, he couldn't shake the feeling of those piercing eyes burning into the back of his head. He burst through the front door, slamming it shut and locking it with trembling hands. "Mom, Dad," he cried, his voice shrill with panic. "There was a clown. He was out there and he wanted to play." Timmy's parents rushed to his side, their faces etched with concern. His mother enveloped him in a tight hug, trying to soothe his trembling. Shh, it's okay, honey," she murmured. "You're safe now. It was just your imagination playing tricks on you." But Timmy knew better. The clown had been real, and the malevolence in its gaze had been all too tangible. As his parents ushered him into the living room, Timmy couldn't shake the lingering sense of dread that had settled in the pit of his stomach. Little did he know his encounter with the sinister clown was just the beginning of a terrifying chain of events that would soon engulf the entire town of Derry. Across town, Mike Hanlon sat alone in the dimly lit Derry Public Library, his brow furrowed in concentration as he pored over a stack of aged newspaper clippings. The pages chronicled decades of child disappearances, each case more disturbing than the last, and a chill ran down Mike's spine as he read through the accounts. This wasn't the first time Mike had delved into Derry's dark history, but the resurgence of the clown sightings had him on high alert. He knew, deep in his bones, that the evil they had vanquished all those years ago had returned. Mike closed his eyes, allowing the memories of that fateful summer to wash over him, the laughter, the camaraderie, the sheer terror they had faced as children. He had been the one to make the pact, to ensure that if Pennywise ever came back, they would all return to Derry and finish what they started. Now, with a heavy heart, Mike knew the time had come. He reached for the rotary phone on his desk, his fingers trembling slightly as he dialed the numbers he had long committed to memory. One by one, he contacted the members of the Losers Club, each call filled with a sense of dread and urgency. "It's happening again," he told them, his voice barely above a whisper. "Pennywise is back and the children of Derry are in danger." The responses varied, some filled with disbelief, others with resignation. But in the end, they all agreed. They had to come back. As Mike hung up the phone, he felt a weight settle upon his shoulders. He knew the road ahead would be arduous, filled with pain and trauma they had buried deep within themselves. But he also knew that the losers were the only ones who could stop the ancient evil that had plagued Derry for centuries. With a heavy sigh, Mike rose from his chair and began to gather the materials he would need. He had work to do, and time was of the essence. The future of Derry and the lives of its children depended on the loser's return. The stage was set for a confrontation 27 years in the making. Pennywise the Dancing Clown had come back, and this time the losers would be ready. The mid-morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of the Derry Municipal Airport, casting a harsh glare on the worn linoleum tiles. Beverly Marsh stepped through the sliding glass doors, her designer sunglasses perched atop her head as she scanned the familiar surroundings. A shiver ran down her spine, and she instinctively hugged her coat tighter against her body. It had been nearly 3 decades since she'd set foot in this place, yet the sights and sounds of Derry felt as if they had been seared into her memory. The faint scent of stale coffee mingled with the acrid tang of jet fuel, awakening long-buried sensations of dread and unease. Beverly's gaze landed on a figure waiting just beyond the security checkpoint, and her heart leapt in her chest. Mike Hanlon, his weathered face etched with the weight of responsibility, offered her a weary smile and a gentle wave. Steeling herself, Beverly wove through the sparse crowd, her steps quickening with each passing moment. "Mike," she breathed, pulling the tall man into a tight embrace. "It's good to see you." "You too, Bev," Mike replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just wish it were under better circumstances." Beverly nodded solemnly, 1,000 unspoken questions dancing on the tip of her tongue. She knew why she was here, why they had all been summoned back to this cursed town. The phone call from Mike had shaken her to her core, unleashing a torrent of memories she had worked so hard to bury. As if on cue, the familiar sound of bickering voices reached her ears, and Beverly turned to see 2 men approaching, one tall and lanky, the other shorter and stockier, their faces etched with a mix of apprehension and reluctant determination. "Look who finally decided to grace us with his presence," the taller man quipped, a wry grin spreading across his face. "Richie Tozier, in the flesh." "Shut up, trash mouth," the shorter man retorted, playfully shoving Richie's shoulder, "like you were any more eager to get your ass back to this shithole." Beverly couldn't help but chuckle at the exchange, the sound of their familiar rapport tugging at the corners of her heart. "Eddie, Richie," she greeted, pulling them both into a warm embrace. "It's been too long." The moment was bittersweet, tinged with the weight of the circumstances that had brought them together once more. As they pulled apart, Beverly caught sight of 2 more figures making their way toward them, one tall and broad-shouldered, the other slender and precise in his movements. "Ben? Stanley?" Beverly's eyes widened, a mixture of joy and disbelief etched on her face. "I can't believe it's really you." Ben Hanscom, the once chubby boy who had blossomed into a handsome, successful architect, enveloped Beverly in a gentle hug. "Hey, Bev," he murmured, his voice laced with a palpable sadness. "It's good to see you." Stanley Uris, his carefully coiffed appearance a stark contrast to the somber mood, offered Beverly a terse nod. "Beverly," he acknowledged, his tone guarded, the haunted look in his eyes betraying the facade of composure. As the losers reunited, a heavy silence settled over the group, the weight of their shared past hanging thick in the air. Mike cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "I'm glad you all made it," he said, his gaze sweeping across the familiar faces. "I know this isn't easy, but we need to talk. Pennywise is back, and the children of Derry are in danger." The words hit the losers like a punch to the gut, unleashing a torrent of emotions they had each worked so hard to suppress. Richie let out a humorless laugh, running a trembling hand through his unruly hair. "Of course he is," the comedian muttered, his bravado barely masking the fear in his eyes. "Because why the hell wouldn't that bastard come back to ruin our lives again?" Eddie placed a comforting hand on Richie's arm, his own expression etched with a mix of dread and resolve. "What do we do, Mike?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mike took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping across the group. "We need to stick together," he said, his tone measured and firm. "Pennywise feeds on our fears, our doubts. But if we face him as a united front, like we did all those years ago, we have a chance of stopping him once and for all." The losers exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of their past experiences palpable. Beverly could feel the old scars on her arm begin to ache, a phantom reminder of the horrors they had faced. "What about Bill?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "Have you been able to reach him?" Mike nodded solemnly. "I have," he replied. "He's on his way. We'll need him if we're going to have any chance of defeating Pennywise." The group fell silent, the gravity of their situation settling like a heavy shroud. Richie let out a shaky breath, his eyes darting around the airport as if half expecting the demonic clown to materialize before them. "Well, shit," he murmured, earning a sympathetic glance from Ben. "Guess we're the Losers Club back in action, just like old times, huh?" The corners of Mike's lips quirked upward in a wistful smile. "Just like old times," he echoed, "but this time we're not going to lose." As the losers gathered their belongings and followed Mike out of the airport, a sense of determination mingled with the palpable fear that gripped them. They had faced Pennywise once before, and they knew the horrors that awaited them. But they also knew that they were the only ones who could stop the ancient evil from wreaking havoc on the town they had sworn to protect. The stage was set for a confrontation 27 years in the making. The losers were back, and they were ready to face their demons, no matter the cost. As the Losers Club gathered their belongings and followed Mike Hanlon out of the Derry Municipal Airport, a heavy silence settled over the group. The weight of their long-buried memories and the dread of confronting their shared trauma hung thick in the air, casting a pall over the familiar surroundings. Beverly Marsh couldn't help but shiver as she stepped out into the crisp autumn air, her gaze sweeping across the town she had sworn to never return to. The streets, the buildings, the very atmosphere of Derry seemed to exude an ominous presence, as if the town itself was alive and aware of the darkness that had once consumed it. Beside her, Richie Tozier let out a mirthless chuckle, shoving his hands deep into the pockets of his worn leather jacket. "Well, this is just as depressing as I remember," he muttered, his eyes scanning the dreary landscape. "Remind me again why we agreed to come back to this shithole." Eddie Kasprak shot Richie a pointed glare, his brow furrowed with a mix of annoyance and concern. "You know damn well why, Richie," he retorted, his voice tight with tension. "We're here to stop Pennywise once and for all. Or have you conveniently forgotten what that bastard did to us?" Richie's expression darkened, and he averted his gaze, the mocking facade crumbling to reveal the deep-seated fear that lurked beneath. "No, I haven't forgotten," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How could I?" The rest of the losers watched the exchange in sober silence, each of them intimately familiar with the horrors they had faced as children. Ben Hanscom placed a comforting hand on Richie's shoulder, his own expression solemn. "We're in this together, Rich," he said, his voice low and reassuring. "We've got each other's backs just like we always have." Richie nodded, his lips curving into a faint, grateful smile. The bond they had forged all those years ago had endured even through the decades of separation, and the losers knew that it would be the key to their survival in the trials that lay ahead. As they followed Mike toward the parking lot, Beverly found herself drawn to the familiar landmarks that dotted the town's landscape. The barrens, where they had played as children. The old ironworks, where they had confronted their darkest fears. And looming in the distance, the forbidding presence of the Derry Public Library, where Mike had dedicated his life to studying the town's haunted history. A shiver ran down Beverly's spine, and she quickened her pace to catch up with the group. "Mike, what exactly are we dealing with here?" she asked, her voice laced with trepidation. "You said Pennywise is back, but what does that mean?" Mike's expression darkened as he turned to face the losers, his gaze sweeping across the familiar faces. "It means that the children of Derry are in grave danger," he said, his tone grave. "In the past few weeks there have been multiple reports of children going missing and eyewitness accounts of a sinister clown figure luring them away." The losers exchanged uneasy glances, the memories of their own encounters with Pennywise flooding back with sickening clarity. "But how is that possible?" Stanley Uris interjected, his usually calm demeanor tinged with a hint of panic. "We killed that thing, or at least we thought we did. It can't just come back, can it?" Mike shook his head, his brow furrowed with concern. "I'm afraid Pennywise is far more powerful and resilient than we ever imagined," he explained. "It's an ancient evil, a shape-shifting entity that has terrorized Derry for centuries, and it seems that our victory all those years ago was only a temporary setback." The losers fell silent, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Bill Denbrough, who had joined them at the airport, let out a weary sigh, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "We should have known it wasn't over," he murmured, his voice tinged with regret. "That thing never plays by the rules, and it certainly doesn't know when to quit." Beverly reached out and squeezed Bill's hand, offering him a sympathetic look. She knew the weight of guilt he carried, the lingering trauma of losing his younger brother Georgie to Pennywise's clutches all those years ago. The scars of that experience had never truly healed, and now they were being forced to confront them once more. As the losers made their way to their rental cars, a sense of unease permeated the group. They knew that they were no longer the fearless, resilient children they had been in the past. Time had taken its toll, hardening them in some ways while leaving them vulnerable in others. "What if we can't do it this time?" Eddie voiced the question that hung unspoken in the air, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. "What if we're not strong enough to defeat Pennywise?" Mike turned to face the group, his expression resolute. "We have to be," he said, his voice steady and unwavering. "The children of Derry are counting on us, and we made a promise to each other all those years ago. We can't back down, not now." The losers nodded, the weight of their responsibility settling heavily upon their shoulders. They had once been a united front, bound by their friendship and their determination to vanquish the evil that had plagued their hometown. Now, as they faced the prospect of confronting Pennywise once more, they knew that they would have to find that strength within themselves once again. As they climbed into their cars and pulled out of the airport parking lot, Beverly found herself lost in thought. She stared out the window, watching the familiar sights of Derry pass by, and couldn't help but wonder what horrors awaited them. The town had changed little in the decades since they had last set foot in it, and Beverly couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness that had once consumed it had never truly left. "We're going to make it through this, Bev." Ben's gentle voice broke the silence, and Beverly turned to meet his gaze. "We're the Losers Club, remember? We've faced Pennywise before, and we'll do it again, no matter what it takes." Beverly nodded, a small, grateful smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I know," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just hope we're strong enough this time." The losers drove on, their determination and trepidation mingling as they made their way toward the heart of Derry. The town that had once been their sanctuary now felt like a dark, foreboding presence, a constant reminder of the horrors that had come before. But the losers were not about to let Pennywise win, not again. They had faced their demons once, and they were prepared to do it again, no matter the cost. As they neared their destination, the losers steeled themselves for the battles that lay ahead. The time for confronting the past had arrived, and they were ready to face it, united in their determination to vanquish the evil that had once consumed their lives.